This is my main battery, the master. This one is not connected at the moment. This is my slave 1 and slave 2. And I have paralleled these batteries here from the positive all the way down and the negative all the way down. But the supply for this tower is only connected to the top battery. And some people and the literature online say this is not correct. I should have at least the negative on the bottom battery or the positive on the bottom battery, so that this whole tower charges more equally. Can we not fully charge this battery as it is? Does one battery wear out more than the other batteries in parallel? Well, you have come to the right channel here. That's exactly the purpose and the big test we are doing today. Guys, welcome back to the off-grid garage here in not so super sunny Australia, but it is still... we are still having 65 amps outside, plus another 30 amps outside. So it is actually close to 100 amps outside. Beautiful! Yes, my friends, this is the big test we are doing right now here for the last 2 weeks. Basically since Christmas, since my son was here with his Ioniq 6 and a 77 kilowatt hour battery. And I realized quickly that a 44 kilowatt hour battery, what we have here, is just not enough to cope with 3 electric vehicles, pool pump, hot water and all this other stuff. So I decided, well, I've got the Gobelpower of power here. Let's connect this one, charge it up from solar during the day, and then we can charge all 3 vehicles after sunset. Because they were basically on the road during the day visiting friends and everything, and when they came home in the afternoon they wanted to recharge the car for the next day trip. And of course I had plenty of sunshine during the day, but the battery shelf was already fully charged, so the whole solar throttled down and I could not harvest more sunshine. So more storage was needed. And yes, by the way, I have painted the wall, right? Look at this. The battery and system room takes shape. Man, I tell you what, it took me forever to finalize this one here. You can smooth out your wall and sand it down. You smooth out more here and sand it down. You keep smoothing and sanding forever. It will never stop, right? So at some stage I said, well, that's it. This is all I'm doing. Sand it down one more time and then it's time to paint. And I've also installed the console for the air conditioning unit in here. And even I had my laser lined up here to find the studs. Yeah, I've got black marks here on the floor where the studs actually are. So basically this console is now mounted to this top metal beam, this 50 by 50 galvanized steel we welded into the garage structure. And this is now basically bombenfest. I've painted the room 3 times here with a very old paint I still had here in my storage under the workbench. It's probably 15 years old or even older maybe. It was in a metal bucket and when I opened the lid, all the rust from the lid actually fell into the paint. And I got some of it out, and I just give it a good stir with the mixer and the battery drill. And sometimes you will find little imperfections like these ones here. There's another one here. This is probably from the rust which fell into the paint. Well, it gives it a nice, unique structure. But apart from that, everything looks nice and beautiful. Alright, but in today's video we want to parallel the battery shelf with the Gobelpower Tower of Power this way around. And we mainly want to watch and observe how these 6 separate batteries here are charging and discharging at the same time. And this is also a bit of a test of what we have to do when we connect more batteries here to the battery shelf and the power wall. Because clearly the battery shelf is already full and we need to connect these other batteries somehow to the system. And let me set the scene here for you. So this is basically how everything works together at the moment. At the left side we have in black here the battery shelf. 3 batteries, 304 ampere hours, 280, 280. Each battery has its own BMS and its own double pole circuit breaker. So we are disconnecting positive and negative for each of the battery. This all feeds into the vertical bus bar system. And then I made a bit of a mistake here because the shunt comes actually first, and then we have another double pole circuit breaker here before we connect these 3 batteries in parallel to the main bus bar system at the top. Yeah, and this is where the solar system is connected to with the MPPTs, and also the inverter and the second inverter and all our other load. Everything is connected to this main bus bar system in the top. And here on the other side we have the Gobel Tower of Power. 3 batteries, 314, 280, 304 ampere hours in parallel. They've got a BMS each as well, and a single pole circuit breaker in each of the battery cases. Yeah. This is all connected to the Powerwall 2.0, to the Lynx Power In, which has its own fuse again to connect these 3 batteries to yet another circuit breaker, which is actually sitting here in the top shelf compartment. This is a 63 amp circuit breaker which connects the battery shelf to the Powerwall 2.0. And in between we also have a 120 amp Anderson connector. Yeah, and this is all important because you will see this in a minute when I show you the numbers. And this is exactly what we have. 3 batteries here in the battery shelf. Each of them has their own BMS. Each of them has their own circuit breaker. We've got the main circuit breaker up here. And then this all connects to the main bus bar system up here in the battery shelf. From here it goes with this additional 63 amp circuit breaker connected to the Powerwall 2.0. We've got a fuse in here. And from here we are connecting with these cables to the Gobelpower Tower of Power at the top battery, yeah? Connecting the master and then paralleling from there further down to the other batteries. So, and how everything is connected right now, you would assume that this battery here is getting most of the power because it's the closest to the solar charge controllers. This one gets less, this one gets less, because there is a certain voltage drop on all this equipment and the bus bar system. And even further, you would say that these batteries here are getting less power because the resistance of all these connections, additional fuse and circuit breaker and Anderson connectors, and the whole cableway is a lot longer to the MPPT solar charge controllers. So this battery gets most of the energy of the Gobel Tower, and this one is the battery in the whole system which gets the least amount of power. So it gives you a better understanding how everything is connected. Alright, without further ado, let's have a look at the numbers. So, and in Home Assistant I have prepared a little dashboard where you can see all 6 of the batteries here. So we're starting with the top shelf battery, the EVE LF304, 304 ampere hours obviously. So we've got the battery information here, the voltage of this whole battery, the current going into this battery, and the state of charge. This, what is it? Yeah, the overkill, the JBD BMS reports to the system. Here in the second row we have the cell with the highest voltage, the lowest voltage, the delta in between these 2 cells, and if the balancer is off or on. Yeah, this is the information I've captured for each of these batteries. So here on the left you can see the battery shelf, top shelf, middle shelf, bottom shelf, with all this same information provided. And then here on the right hand side you've got the same for the Gobel Tower. Top stack, middle stack and bottom stack, yeah, providing exactly the same information: voltage, current, state of charge, max, min, delta, and if the balancer is already on. So this looks like this. We've got our 4 solar charge controllers here. We are providing 5.4 kilowatt at the moment, 3.1 going into the battery shelf, and what you can see here is a DC load of 2.3 kilowatt. This is basically what's going into the Gobel Tower of Power. Jeez, need a better word for that. I always mix this up. 22.7 amps going into the top shelf battery, 16.7 amps middle shelf, 18 amps into the bottom shelf, 14 amps into the Gobel Tower top battery, 6 amps only in the middle battery of the Gobel Tower, and 9.5 amps into the bottom battery of the Gobel Tower. This is all balancing out itself somehow, yeah, because the voltage is almost identical. We have a bit of a drop here between the battery shelf on the left to the Gobel Tower on the right. And this is because of all the voltage drop we have on the connections and additional fuses and breakers and Anderson connectors and whatever. Yeah, we've got 53.88 volts here, charging voltage, and we've got 53.73. You look at these numbers here, this is the battery which has the lowest voltage, of course, there's most of the voltage drop, and this is the one with the highest. So, and as expected, the battery shelf is actually charging faster, because it has a better connection to your source, to the charger, than the Gobelpower. So here we have a very quick look at the Victron VRM of the battery shelf. And we can see we are charging into this battery with around 30 amps. And when we have a look at the Gobelpower of power, we can see we've got like 17 amps. So it is always these 2/3 into the battery shelf and 1/3 into the Gobelpower. And as you know, we also have a special setup here in the middle shelf battery. We are using aluminium bus bars to connect these single shelves and not copper bus bars as we use down here and in the top shelf battery. And this causes this battery to charge a bit slower during the normal charging process, because I think we have a higher resistance with these aluminium bus bars. Even they have a lower resistance itself than the copper bus bars due to the sheer size of the aluminium plates. But I think there's a bit of corrosion in between these aluminium bus bars and the aluminium terminals of the batteries. And over time, this has caused this battery to charge a bit slower until the battery is fully charged and we are rising the voltage to about 55 volts. Then we will see the top battery and the bottom battery is actually slowing down because they're already saturated, and this one is catching up then, so we will have a lot more current going into the middle shelf battery. And this is what you will see once we are fully charging the system now. And this explains why this middle shelf battery has a higher current than the other two shelves. And yeah, at a very soon video, we have to replace these aluminium bus bars here with copper bus bars to make this battery charge the same way as all the other ones. If I do all this battery testing with parallel batteries here, it just confuses people because this battery always behaves differently. It has these aluminium bus bars from the beginning and it was a bit of a test. Okay, so now the BMS is reporting 85, 83, 88. And here in the Gobelpower, 78, 77 and 86% state of charge. So we are very close, but we had some rain actually just now. So hopefully we've got enough sun to fully charge this battery as quick as possible now. And then we will see what is happening once the battery shelf gets full, because these ones are charging faster than the Gobelpower. So what happens if the voltage actually wants to rise in these parallel batteries with the other batteries in parallel which have a lower voltage? And as you know, in a parallel configuration we can have only one voltage, yeah? Plus minus a few millivolt because of voltage drop. But now with the clouds currently in place here, you also can see that the voltage is actually fairly equal. There's only a few millivolt here, 53.61. 53.69. Okay, once we get over 95%, I'll be back and then we have a look at the voltages, the currents going into these single batteries here, and also what is happening to our Gobelpower, which is connected the wrong way, some people would say. And I had these comments under one of my last videos actually, where people said, Andy, we have seen you have connected these Gobel batteries here all at the top. You should know better and should connect one of the cables down at the bottom battery. So there is a cross connection, positive up here, negative down here. Well, this is exactly the purpose of this channel here, right? We are not doing it the way everyone knows, everyone is reading it. We're always doing it differently here on the channel and see what is going to happen. Oh, there's more rain coming. Not good. And here, very interesting, once the sun is coming out now again, we are charging these batteries here now full blast, whatever the solar system can deliver. This is currently 11.2 kilowatt from the MPPTs and around 1 kilowatt from the tilt system. So you can see here 30, 25, 25 in the battery shelf, 22, 9 and 20 in the Gobelpower only. You can see this one here is charging very slow, yeah? Slower than the one which is further connected actually. And this is mainly due because this is a smaller battery. These are only 280 ampere hours to 304 ampere hours. It could also mean that this battery is on a higher state of charge already, even it shows 77% only. The lowest of all three of these. It doesn't mean the battery is actually on 77. This is just what the BMS shows. So this could also mean that this battery is already more saturated at this voltage than the top one and the bottom one in the Gobel tower. Yeah, it just takes less power. Again, we will see once the voltage is rising if this one is catching up as well. But at the moment here at 53.81 volts, it is happy with around 8 amps only. So here in the battery shelf I'm using a combination of PDOT boards and IBMS to collect all the data of these battery cells, while here in the Gobel tower we are using the Home Assistant BatMon integration and connect via Bluetooth to read out all the BMSs. That's how I collect all these information about these batteries at the moment. So, and we are now coming to a point where we are hitting 55 volts charge voltage, at least with the battery shelf. You can see we are very close here. 54.85, 54.9, and the Gobel tower has still a voltage of 54 volts only. So we've got almost 1 volt difference now, because we are really pushing hard into the system. Yeah, we are charging with 102% now, 15 kilowatt almost from the MPPTs here, and 1.9 from the tilt system. All goes into the system. 159, 160 amps into the battery shelf and 92 amps into the Gobel tower. Now 130 amps into the Gobel tower. And this is a 63 amp circuit breaker in between, right? So it won't last long with this high current. Let's see if this one comes down. 81 amps, 80 amps, 79. I don't want to trip the circuit breaker, which happened before a lot of times. Especially at the beginning when the Gobel tower was still on a very different state of charge and the battery shelf was full, basically shut down, didn't take any energy anymore, and all the power coming in went into the Gobel tower, and this exceeded our 63 amps by a lot. But now we are charging with 75 amps, so that's totally fine. Perfect. Yeah, and the aluminium bus bar battery is now catching up. Top one is lower. Bottom one is already saturated at this voltage here, but the middle shelf battery with aluminium bus bars is now catching up because it charged slower all the time before that. And you can also see the Gobel tower is now catching up as well. The top battery 31 amps, 21, 20 amps. See, it has actually increased the frequency now to 52 Hertz to limit the tilt system, because I set the charge current limit to 150 amps. We don't want to have more than 150 amps in the system. So what I'm seeing here, 75 amps going into the Gobel tower and around 76 amps going into the battery shelf. So it's almost 1-to-1 now. Let's see how they're balancing out. Even the Gobel tower has a far less optimal connection to the whole system. And if you're ever wondering how long such a 63 amp circuit breaker lasts with 80 amps of load on it, well, about an hour, and now it has just tripped. So I'm turning this one back on. It is probably heated up now and will trip again. So I have to limit the charge current into the Gobel tower again a little bit so the circuit breaker actually lasts. We are very close to 55.2 volts anyway, but it is just a bit too much for this circuit breaker. So, and now we've got this effect that the battery shelf has a certain voltage. And this exact voltage is applied to the Gobel tower as well, but not completely, because we have some voltage drop on the cabling and connection and all this other stuff in between. So the voltage drop plus the battery voltage of the Gobel tower is exactly the same as the one from the battery shelf. So, and now as we see that the Gobel tower is catching up, the voltage is slowly rising, the amps are going down, the voltage drop on these cables is going down, and the voltage can actually rise even further. And eventually the current will be zero and the batteries will have the exact same voltage as in the battery shelf, which is 55.2 volts. So, and now we have hit 55 volts in the battery shelf. See, all three batteries are just above 55 volts and the Gobel tower is still catching up. 54.3, 54.2 and 54.19. Battery shelf is almost taking no power anymore. 1 amp, 0.6 amp, 1.4 amp going into these batteries, while the Gobel tower is taking all the power now. So you've got a complete shift from what it was before, when the battery shelf took all the energy. Now the Gobel tower takes all this energy and the battery shelf just has to wait. It just started raining again. So it's a very interesting shift to see from the battery shelf to the Gobeltower now. And once the Gobeltower batteries will absorb, the current will go down and so will the voltage drop. That means the battery voltage can actually rise in the Gobelpower tower as well. Gobeltower power. What is it called? The Gobel batteries. Here you can see it. The battery shelf is not taking any power anymore, -5 watts, while all the power goes now into the Gobeltower, 4.3 kilowatt. And now we are seeing 55.2 volts in the battery shelf. All three batteries have reached this. Balancers are turning on as needed. We are on 3.46 volts, 3.46, 3.456 volts. You can see the deviation here, 17, 15 millivolt, 13 millivolt. Batteries are fully charged now, 100%. 3 of the BMS is showing 100%. The bottom one doesn't, it never did. But at 55.2 volts and almost no current going into the battery is fully charged. We all know that. Here in the Gobeltower, it's quite the opposite. We are still 0.7 volts behind the battery shelf. We are charging with 8.5, 45 amps into the 280 amp battery. It is catching up now. And 23 amps into the bottom battery, the LF304. This is actually not a K. That is wrong. There is no LF304K. And now usually your absorption timer would start. Half an hour would allow the balancer to run. And this would work for the battery shelf because the battery shelf has reached this voltage. But here in the Gobeltower, we wouldn't balance, right? The timer would start running already, but we will not balance because we haven't reached the 55.2 volts yet. You can also see that the voltage is rising quite quickly now in the Gobeltower because all these batteries are almost full now and the battery is now coming out of the flat part of this charge curve going into the steep area and voltage is rising quicker and quicker now. Almost no current in the top battery, 50 amps into the middle battery catching up and 20 amps in the bottom battery of the Gobeltower. While here in the battery shelf nothing is happening anymore. We are idling on 55.2 volts and just wait for the Gobeltower to catch up. And we want to actually see how long this takes. So it is now 1442, so let's say 1440 when we hit the 55.2 volts in the battery shelf. Let's see how long it takes until we reach 55.2 volts in the Gobeltower as well. And there we go, just after 18 minutes or so, yeah, 18 minutes, 18 minutes, we are on 55.2 volts here with the Gobeltower as well. You can see these three batteries have fully caught up now, less than 1 amp, 1.5 amp, 1.1 amp going into the battery, so very similar to what we see in the battery shelf as well. So both batteries have now 55.2 volts and there's no voltage drop on these cables anymore because there's no current flowing anymore, right? So regardless how long your cable is from one battery to another battery, eventually the second battery will catch up. And here 18 minutes seems like an eternity. And let me tell you a quick story here. When I started this experiment like 2 weeks ago, just after Christmas, the Gobeltower was on like 60-70% only, while the battery shelf was fully charging every single day. And of course, the absorption timer runs on 30 minutes only. So after we hit 55.2 volts with the battery shelf, the timer starts and 30 minutes later we reduce the charge voltage to 53.6. This half an hour was not enough time to fully charge the Gobeltower. So it had only this half an hour time where we really pushed energy into this Gobeltower, and it took over a week for the Gobeltower to actually catch up. And then I could see the first time 55.2 volts in the Gobeltower as well. So, and if I fully charge the batteries to 55.2 volts every single day, the Gobeltower has no problem catching up and charging to 55.2 volts as well. And the time is only 6 to 8 minutes later than when the battery shelf reaches this voltage. So it still gives the Gobeltower over 20 minutes of balance time, which is sufficient to fully top balance this battery as well. But what we saw today is, because I haven't fully charged the battery for 3 or 4 days now, there was actually a larger difference between the battery shelf and the Gobeltower. And it took like these 16 to 18 minutes now for the Gobeltower to catch up again and to reach this 55.2 volts again. And of course here you can tweak these settings. Yeah, you can probably increase the absorption timer from 30 minutes to 60 minutes. Just give the Gobelpower more time to actually recharge and reach the 55.2 volts, and then it has still plenty of time to do a full top balancing as well. So you need to tweak these settings a little bit if you have a longer cable connected to your second battery. A second thing to tweak here is to adjust the timer for your reset of 100% state of charge if you have JK inverter BMSs connected. Because they only reset after the absorption timer in the BMS has run out. Yeah, and if this sits on 30 minutes and you're only absorbing for 20 minutes, it will never reset to 100%. So you probably need to take this one down to only 10 minutes or so. And then after hitting 55.2 volts, 10 minutes later it will then reset to 100%. As we can see here in the top battery and bottom battery, this one has not triggered yet because, well, the timer has just started in this BMS here. This was the last battery to actually hit 55.2 volts, and the timer sits on 30 minutes still, so it will take another 20 minutes or so until we see 100% here as well. So there is some tweaking of the settings necessary as well if you want all the BMSs to be on 100%. So the overall and common assumption that we are not fully charging a battery connected like this, debunked. But what about the tear and wear of a battery connected like this? Let's go into the overview. So what we have seen is that the battery shelf charges first, right? This one hits 55.2 volts first, while this one is still charging. But then after doing so, the battery shelf actually idles and waits for the Gobelpower to also fully charge to 55.2 volts. So it is only a matter of time until the battery shelf and the Gobelpower charge to 55.2 volts. But again, this only works if you have enough sunshine and you fully charge your batteries every single day. If you don't charge your battery every single day, you're actually using the battery shelf a little bit more. The depth of discharge is a bit higher in the battery shelf than it is in the Gobelpower. And this over time could lead to a more wear and tear of the battery shelf than you have in the Gobelpower. So, and I don't see a problem with that, because this is a classic example anyway. We have installed the battery shelf here like 3-4 years ago, and now we are expanding the system with new batteries, the Gobelpower. So we are combining new batteries with old batteries anyway. So eventually, after 10, 15, 20 years or whatever, the batteries in the battery shelf will die first anyway. So we have to replace all these batteries here on the shelf, but can still use the batteries in the Gobelpower. So only if you install a brand new system and have exactly matched batteries, cells in each of your battery banks, 6 exactly the same batteries connected at the same time, 100% matched, you could potentially still see that these batteries are wearing out faster than the tower. And so what? Is this a disadvantage? I don't think so. Because when you have to replace these batteries, you replace these ones first, and the other ones will still last for another 2 or 3 years maybe. So it is actually beneficial to only replace these batteries and keep these ones here running with your system. So from a financial perspective, you're replacing only half of your batteries and keep the other ones running. So I actually never understood this argument where people said, well, where they were trying to wear out all these batteries in the same way. And here in such a classic case, we have like 1, 2, 3, 4 different chemistries here anyway. So these ones have up to 6,000 cycles, these ones have up to 10,000 cycles, up to 8,000 cycles. So there's no way you have the same batteries and they're wearing out the same way anyway. Regardless how you connect these batteries, they will always wear out in a different way. So in terms of tear and wear of these batteries, it does not matter how you connect them. You will never ever achieve an equal wear and tear on these batteries. And people are not right saying, Andy, you are doing it wrong. This needs to be cross-connected. Otherwise, you're wearing out these batteries quicker. That is not true. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Thanks for all your amazing support. Thanks for over 102,000 subscribers on the channel here. Mind-blowing. Thank you very, very much for that. And thank you very much to all my channel members. We're getting a little perk like videos or photos from time to time. And also thank you very much to all these people who have donated to the channel, buying me a beer in these hot and sunny conditions here. Thank you very, very much for all your support here. Alright, my friends, I would say until the next video, you stay charged, stay safe, and thanks again for watching. See you then. Bye bye.